Today on Family Talk.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Family Talk, a division of the James Dobson Family Institute. I'm Dr. Tim Clinton, and today we're going to do something a little different to begin the broadcast. In the last few weeks, we've seen significant challenges, issues, concerns, and defeats in the fight for the precious life inside a mother's womb. We're all very troubled by the news coming out of New York and Virginia in the expansion of abortion laws. Dr. Dobson has been grieved by this evil, and he felt compelled to speak out about it. Last week, he appeared on the Todd Starnes radio program on Fox News Radio, and we wanted you to hear a little clip of what Dr. Dobson had to say before we get into the remainder of today's broadcast. Here's what he said. I'll be coming back and adding a few comments after we hear Dr. Dobson.
On the Newsmaker line, our good friend Dr. James Dobson. He is founder and president of Family Talk. And Dr. Dobson, I know that you have been pretty upset over what happened, not just in Virginia, but also up in New York State.
Todd, I think there has not been anything in recent years that has disturbed me more than the passage of this New York legislation. I know there are millions of Americans who are grieving it today. It's called the Reproductive Health Act. It's anything but reproductive health. I think it's the most egregious assault on life in the history of this country. I mean, it happened in Europe in the Nazi era, but I don't think anything quite like this has been passed. It amounts to infanticide. It's the murder of fully developed or up to that time of delivery that assaults a tiny baby. And if that child should manage to survive the assault and the effort to kill him, the law allows the abortionist, who may not even be a physician, to leave him to die on a table on a porcelain disc or plate, and there's no one to hold him, Todd. There's no one to comfort this scared little baby. There's no one to warm him or to welcome him into the world, no one to nurse him, no one to care. I mean, have we no shame? This is unbelievable, and yet it has happened in the state of New York, and it's happening everywhere, or many places. It almost happened in Virginia 2 or 3 days ago. So this is deeply disturbing.
Dr. Dobson, I was watching the video of this delegate there in Virginia, Kathy Tran. She introduced this bill. And the video is really compelling. And we've posted on the website, folks, so you can see it for yourself. But Dr. Dobson, it was very clear to me, her body language, she was rolling her eyes. She looked very impatient and almost offended that anyone would object to this. I mean, this is really, honestly, when I saw her responses, I just saw evil, Dr. Dobson.
Well, the whole thing is evil. It is wicked. I call it egregious. I mean, a holy God cannot smile on a country that would do that to its most innocent victims, those that can't speak for themselves, those that can't defend themselves. I saw the video you're talking about, and I interpreted her body language and her unwillingness to answer the question directly as embarrassment. Maybe she has no embarrassment, but they got her to admit that if that baby is born, that there is no hope for him, no help, no medical care. They just allow him to lie there and die. I mean, Todd, we wouldn't do this to a dog. There are laws against cruelty against animals. We wouldn't do this to a dog, and yet this legislature, when they had passed this bill, stood and cheered. They cheered. There was no sense of the gravity of what they had done. They stood up there and laughed and cheered. I tell you what, I've lost a lot of confidence in the legislative process in certain parts of this country.
Dr. Dobson, you have been warning the nation about this for years. You have been sounding the alarm. Now here we are. Rhode Island's governor, also a Democrat, says she would sign similar legislation in her state. What is the ultimate goal here of these people, and where do you think all of this goes?
Well, it's the coarsening of America. It is, in the early days of the abortion movement after the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision by the Supreme Court, the proponents of abortion would not face the fact that they were killing babies, and they refused. They did everything they could to keep from having to deal with that. They called it meaningless protoplasm, or a blob of tissue, or a product of a conception. And they obviously were reluctant to let people know what was really going on. Now, all pretense is over. I mean, we're talking about killing fully developed babies after 9 months of gestation, and killing this fully born, fully formed child at the moment of delivery. I mean, the Tran interview that you saw talked about stopping the delivery process when the woman is in labor. The baby is right there, and you reach in there and cut him to pieces. Man, I'm telling you, there's something wrong with us.
Dr. Dobson, what do we do? What can we do?
Well, a lot depends on who we vote for. I'm not making this political, but there are those that would oppose this, and they're in positions of power in some places. And we should let our voices be heard and do everything we can to defend priceless, innocent babies. We have just become so callous that we don't feel anymore. That's a sad thing. What took place there in New York is apparently supported by the majority of the people in that state, in Virginia and Massachusetts and other places. It's a spiritual issue from my perspective. It has major implications. We have the blood of 60 million babies on our hands, and that blood calls out to God. I can't believe that a loving God would fail to notice what we're doing.
I'm afraid you're right, and that's what troubles me as well. Dr. Dobson, we're going to have to leave it there. We're always honored to have you on the program, and we wish you the very best. Thank you.
Todd, I appreciate what you do so much, and we'll talk again.
You know, there really are no words. I know this, though. We will only win this battle if we stay close to God's heart and we stay the course, together, compassionately and boldly, in a way that God will get all the glory. Let's let the Lord know, and all those who have stood strong, that we will stand united, that we will rise up for such a time as this. I hope you'll share Dr. Dobson's heart, his message, these comments with everybody you know. Let's pray that God will do his work in our country in this hour. For the remainder of today's broadcast, we're changing gears now to listen to a classic interview featuring Dr. Dobson and one of my all-time favorite guests, Dr. Archibald Hart, as they talk about the dangers of addiction. They're going to analyze how these harmful dependencies are formed and explain the importance of moderation and control in your everyday life. Here now is that conversation on this edition of Family Talk.
You know, the last time you were here, Arch, we had such an interesting conversation on adrenaline and stress, dealing with your book by that name. Was that the precise title?
That's it, yes.
Adrenaline and Stress. That's an excellent book. We're not going to talk about it today, but let's get some definitions straight, okay? Describe in the context that you're writing about here the difference between an addiction and an urge or a compulsion.
To be an addict to something means you're a slave to it. That's really what the word means. It means that you can no longer control it. You have no choice over it. And there are many behaviors that become so powerful in controlling you that you can no longer control it. The television addict says, I'm going to sit down for half an hour and watch television, and 5 hours later is dead asleep because it cannot move away from that television set. In the long run, though, the addiction has to be damaging to be a true addiction. No matter how often you do something, if the long-term consequence of that is not damaging, we can hardly talk of it as an addiction.
Yeah, sexual behavior between a husband and wife is something that they are urged to do and like to do and do regularly, we would hope, and yet it's not damaging, so it's not addictive.
No, and it can only be an addiction if in the long term it's damaging. But I think there's one other aspect of what makes for an addiction, and that is, as with the substance addictions, Jim, it's an addiction when what you are doing or eating or drinking, when it is a form of escape from the reality of life, where you cannot face your anxieties, your tensions, whatever it is that is to be dealt with. It's a form of escape. Take workaholism, for example. The difference between the work enthusiast and the workaholic. They may not be in terms of the quantity of work they do, but the work enthusiast is not using the work as a form of escape from their feelings, from their emotions, from the reality of their life.
How can you tell? How do you know yourself? You say it's hidden from yourself.
It's hidden from yourself, but it is not hidden from others. And some of us may need to listen to a son or a daughter or a wife or a husband say to us, honey, when you come home from work and you switch off and you will not engage your children in issues that need to be talked about, or you will not deal with your son's problem, or on and on and on, when you are using it as a form of escape to get out of or run away from your responsibilities, then it is no different to taking cocaine or drinking alcohol to excess. We all work hard, and that's what life is about. But there are some people who just go too far, and they are addicted. The adrenaline has got to be high. They can't stop doing it or working.
Because the first 3 days of a vacation, they lose their minds.
I was speaking to a pastor yesterday who is more my experience that it takes me 10 days before I come off
bad news.
My adrenaline high. And you go through all the withdrawal symptoms. Yeah. The restlessness, the fidgetiness, pacing up and down, turning the television set on, putting it off again. And 10 days it takes me. And he was saying that's exactly how long it takes him. So if you have a 2-week vacation, you've got about 2 days, 3 days.
You're referring to yourself, too.
I am.
You have takes that long to come down.
It does. When I'm not watching it, you see. Yeah. Now, I'm much more careful these days. I manage it very, very carefully, and that is I build in what I call Sabbaths all the time. I take little breaks. I know how to quit. I know how to get away from the pressures.
Give me some other examples of hidden addictions. You mentioned workaholism. You mentioned eating as a hidden addiction. Yeah. Are there others?
Well, perhaps we could also think of the addictions, these hidden addictions, as falling into the same categories as the substance addictions. They are behaviors that stimulate, just as we have substances that are stimulants, and they are behaviors that tranquilize or are depressants, as in the substance. So that there's a very close parallel between what is substance addicting and what is behavior addicting. The stimulating behaviors are people who thrill-seeking. They are people who are addicted to thrills and excitements. And they do risky things, and they walk on the edge of parapets, and they're always looking for the thrill of some risky excitement. But that becomes an addiction, you see. You want that. And now the other interesting thing is that there's a crossover effect from the substance addictions to these behavior addictions. It is now very widely believed that if you are addicted to a stimulating substance, you are also addicted to stimulating behaviors.
Does it work the other way? If you are addicted to a stimulating behavior, are you more likely to become addicted if exposed
you
to
easily
substance?
addict to a stimulating substance. And not only that, but to understand that one becomes addicted to stimulant, whether it's behavior or substances, is important, because long after the biological dependence on a substance for someone, say, who's been taking a stimulant has passed away, they find that these people re-addict very rapidly. Mm-hmm. And often it's because they maintain the addiction to the stimulant substance by maintaining stimulating behaviors. So that if you are using a stimulant substance even that is more socially acceptable as a stimulant, you are maintaining the addiction to the stimulant.
So in essence, if you got a problem in one of those areas, you better be careful, because you're a right candidate for addiction in the other.
That's right. That's my point. But the tranquilizing behaviors now, for example, there are a whole group of behaviors that parallel the tranquilizing drugs. Television watching is the one most recently that we've got evidence of, that sitting and watching a television for several hours has a profound tranquilizing effect. And you can measure it on the body's changes in the chemistry and the physiology of the body, so that it is a powerful tranquilizing mechanism that comes out of that activity.
Right. Now, is there a contradiction there, Arch? Because you're recommending that people gear down.
Yes.
So why would you not want them to use this tranquilizing effect to gear down?
Good point. I think a tranquilizer in terms of behaviors is good for you, provided it doesn't cross one of the other criterion by which we judge whether something is addicting or not. Namely, it's a form of escape. I don't want to, honey, get those kids off my back. I don't want to face the realities of my life. I'm going to sit and watch this television set. That's no different to a husband who says, get those kids off my back. I'm going to drink my beer, my liquor. You see? It's the same mechanism. But if you're fulfilling your responsibilities, and if you are in control of the behavior, not it in control of you, then it's not an addiction. Another interesting tranquilizer comes from excessive exercise. We all know people who run and run and run and run 1 trillion miles to finally get to the place where there is this massive release of endorphins, these hormones in the brain that we've learnt a lot about in recent years.
Arch, that's a dirty lie. I have been looking for that all my life. I get out and I run, and the only thing I think about is stopping.
But there is this massive release of endorphin, you see, that has a tranquilizing effect. And there are joggers out there, bless their souls, who are running for that high. Now, I think exercise is important. But it has to be under control. It has to be not in excess or so excessive that it takes you out of your life.
Paul said we should have moderation in
all things.
Boy, and the wisdom of the Scriptures comes through.
The Scripture is wisdom. But you see, it's hidden to us often when our whole work ethic, our whole culture is built on this supercharged dream. And many of us are living supercharged lives, supersonic lives, and hidden in that lifestyle is the risk of so much of this addictive mechanism. And this gets back again to underlying all these hidden addictions and the shoppers, and we'll get into compulsions and so forth in a moment. But in every one instance when someone is addicted to something like this, they are not able to face their emotions, their feelings directly. They're looking for an anesthetic of some sort. And that anesthetic comes either from stimulating behaviors or from tranquilizing behaviors. Those are the two main mechanisms.
How would you break out cause and effect here, Arch? Let's suppose an individual comes through childhood with great needs. Parents are not what they should be to that son or daughter. Comes into adolescence rejected by his or her peers, doesn't get invited to the school functions, never has a date, feels ugly, unacceptable. Comes into the adult years, the person finds a profession that they can do, and not only do, but do well. The world needs their services, and they go crazy. All right, the addiction is set up in that case by the psychological
the set of needs, the unmet needs that they carry over into adulthood.
All right, how about the biochemical frame of reference? A person inherits from the father, this vulnerability. Can you break out the biochemistry versus the psychological aspects of this?
But I don't think that having a vulnerability, say, built into your genes, into your body, necessarily creates the addiction. It just so happens that this inability to metabolize alcohol, that when you do take it to excess, that it's going to have a more powerful effect upon you. But the psychological need really has to be understood as the primary mechanism upon which these addictions are built. And there's just happens chance, really, whether you're going to be an alcoholic or a workaholic. Depends on certain weaknesses in your system.
We're going to talk about this next time again, but we have a couple of minutes left now. Just assure us that the psychological frame of reference and the anatomy and physiology are not destiny. Your subtitle here says, Overcoming the Closet Compulsions That Waste Your Time and Control Your Life.
Yes.
Is it possible to deal with this?
Absolutely. And if we were total victims of our bodies and our minds, there'd be no free will, there'd be no free choice. But I don't think that's true. I think that we are responsible for our choices, our decisions. We are responsible for the way we manage our bodies, manage our minds, just as we are responsible for the spiritual aspects of our being. And for many of us, we just need to increase our awareness of what we're doing. All I needed was the awareness that my exciting desire, my need for excitement was causing me problems.
And you still allow yourself to get excited.
I do, but I
not live on
balance
excitement.
it. You see, the key word here is balance. And that one has to learn to balance one's life. I cannot use exciting behavior to avoid the responsibilities of life.
You still sleep 9 hours a night?
I sleep 9 hours. Jim, I'm a strong advocate of that. And I manage to do it. I really do.
And your workload, you can handle that during the day without feeling yourself sliding.
It's the other way around. Unless I get a good night's sleep, I cannot complete my work because it's an issue of efficiency. I think for me, I am far more efficient when my mind is rested and crisp and clear. I don't have to undo things as often. So for me, it is a very, very important preparation for a balanced life.
You're not just talking about obsessive-compulsive people, which I want to deal with in the next program, or those who are anxiety neurotics or have some particular emotional disorder. This is the North American lifestyle, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the commoner's Bible for managing your life. We are dealing here with what affects every single one of us. As parents, I'm concerned at the way in which we are setting up our children.
Describe what obsessive-compulsive behavior is. Give us some examples.
Well, an obsessive-compulsive behavior, in the strict clinical sense, is different from an addiction in that obsessions, compulsions have to do with pain, whereas addictions have to do with pleasure. Now, the pleasure of addictions may have to do with stimulants or tranquilizers, but obsessive-compulsive behaviors are driven by pain, Jim. Let me illustrate. I believe there are people who shop excessively who are compulsive shoppers, and there are people who shop excessively because they are addicted to shopping. And the dynamics are different for those two mechanisms. In the addiction to shopping, the person uses the shopping as a lift to give them an oomph, to give them some stimulating behavior. Maybe they're in a boring relationship, or they have so many problems that they feel overwhelmed, they don't know how to deal with them, so they hit the shop. They take their money and they go and buy whatever they can to get an excessive lift coming out of that. Someone told me just a few days ago that she went and spent $3,000 that she doesn't have recently because she was so sick and tired of all her family problems. Everybody's getting on her back. It was the only way she could cope with that. It gives her pleasure. But there's a compulsive shopper, and the compulsion is different. For compulsions, strictly speaking, we're talking about pain. Here is a person who can't resist, who unless they buy something, tension rises, anxiety increases. They've got to give expression to it. And so most of the obsession and compulsion behaviors have to do with relieving pain in some way. And so by engaging in the behavior, they relieve the pain.
Now, when obsessive-compulsive behavior is at its most extreme, it absolutely dominates life.
It does. It controls everything else. It shapes the way you think. Compulsive, and that's why compulsions and obsessions go together, because you may be engaging in behavior that's compulsive, but you also have all these thoughts that are obsessing. So you lie awake all night and you can't think about anything else.
Well, this is another book that you've written, Arch, that has great practical application. There's a lot for us to talk about, and even if we do give the next broadcast to it, we're not going to cover it all. Arch, thanks for being here. We'll
Good to
pick
be
it
with
up
you, Jim.
Next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Family Talk and an insightful conversation on the pain and struggle of secret addictions. I'm Roger Marsh. Thanks for listening to today's broadcast, and be sure to join us again tomorrow to hear the continuation of Dr. Dobson's conversation with Dr. Arch Hart. That's coming up next time right here on Family Talk.
This has been a presentation of the Dr. James Dobson Family Institute.